Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and Leaky Black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davis. You have consent. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please knock that out while you're here. And while you're doing that, let me remind you what we've got going on. It's called the Summer Shoot-Around Series, during which we're going to focus on 20 notable teams over a span of 10 weeks, 2 per week. 20 teams in 10 weeks. We're almost done. We're almost done. We're doing the schools in alphabetical order. We've already knocked out Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Auburn, Baylor, Creighton, Duke, Gonzaga, Houston, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan, North Carolina, and Ohio State. Now we turn our attention to Tennessee, the Vols. They went 27-8 last season, finished tied for second in the SEC. They won the SEC tournament, got a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, then lost to Michigan in the second round. From that team, they lose Kennedy Chandler, John Fulkerson, Victor Bailey. It's 3 of the top 6 scorers, but they're bringing back Santiago Vescovi, Josiah Jordan James, Zakai Ziegler, Olivier Kamwa. That's 4 of the top 5 scorers from a team that finished 9th at KenPom, and they're enrolling a top 25 recruiting class that's highlighted by 5-star wing Julian Phillips. That's a good roster. It's why I've got Tennessee ranked 9th in the top 25 and 1. We'll see what Norlander thinks of Rick Barnes' Vols next, but first, a word from our partners.
The UEFA Champions League. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold-your-breath acceleration. While Mbappe shines in the city of lights, Benzema's racking up the hat tricks, and the Reds want Mo Magic in Liverpool. This ain't amateur hour. This is the best of the best of the best. This is the UEFA Champions League. Stream every match live on Paramount+.
All right, Deadleg. I've got Tennessee ranked 9th in the top 25 and 1. That's 9th in the nation, 3rd in the SEC behind Kentucky and Arkansas. Where are you at on what will be Rick Barnes' 8th team in Knoxville? Boy, time flies, doesn't it?
It kind of does fly.
8th year.
Knoxville. 8th year. I went down to Knoxville when Donnie Tyndall got the job and went down for like an off-season like deep dive feature. It's the only time I've been down to Knoxville. I've never been to Thompson Bowling for a game, but I have been down to Knoxville. Awesome college town for sure. Right there on the river with the Vol Navy and all that good stuff. But I can't believe it's been that long. And then Tennessee's fortunes, really, you could have never really known it then. But the Tyndall stuff, he got a 10-year show cause. Dating back to his time at Southern Miss, and it was a misfire of a hire, and then they are able to bring in Rick Barnes, and he's been able to continue Tennessee on its path to relevance for the most part since Bruce Pearl really resuscitated the program and got it back to a huge spot there. But yeah, he's been there a while, although they're still waiting on a deep tournament run. Tennessee's only made 1 Sweet 16 under Barnes. That was back in 2019. I was actually there. And when they lost in Louisville at the regional semis there. But, they're still always good. Like, they're always ranked under him. They've had draft picks. They've, been able to recruit at a high level. They're coming off a good year. I do have a trivia time for you relatively off the top here.
Bring it.
Tennessee won the SEC tournament.
I know. And was underseeded in the NCAA tournament. They should have been a 2 seed.
Well, we'll get to that too. Last time Tennessee won the SEC tournament prior to the year 2022 would have been what, GP?
Prior to the year 2022, the last time Tennessee won the SEC tournament would have been, I think Ron Slay probably had something to do with it.
I'm going to need a year. I'm going to need a year here.
I'm going to say it happened in, let's go 2007.
I really need a buzzer on my board here, and I'll get that in. Ron Slay was not even born.
I know, but I decided to go with the Bruce Pearl team.
This is your answer. 1979.
Smashing Pumpkins.
Cool kids never have the time. That is unbelievable. Prior to that, Tennessee last won an SEC or conference tournament championship in 1943. I don't have an audio drop for that. Who even knew they were playing conference tournaments in 1943? But that was prior to 79. And
that's back when 2-year-old Tony Hinkle was doing his thing.
He was like 44-year-old Tony Hinkle at that point. But yeah,
it's unbelievable.
He'd been doing his thing for a damn long time there. Tennessee brings 9 players back, but they're coming off a rarity, and obviously Kentucky Just like 50 plus SEC tournament championships, wins in most years, but still to go that long between an SEC tournament championship is significant. With Tennessee having 9 players back, and yes, they came undone in the second round against Michigan. They were wrongly seeded. I do think this team has a real fun shot, and I say fun intentionally because I love Zakai Ziegler as a major national breakout player. He played really well alongside Chandler last season. Now he'll have the reins, averaged 8.8 points, 2.7 assists, almost 2 steals a game. I think Zakai Ziegler will wind up being a top 10 point guard in America, and that will go a long way to, Tennessee having top 3 bona fides in the SEC. Josiah Jordan-James being back, and they bring Tyreek Key via Indiana State there. So they have a lot here. I don't know if they have an outright star. I mean, Julian Phillips might be that, GP. He was 13th in the composite at 247, but and I'll get to their schedule when we do the regular season win total in a minute here. There's a lot to be optimistic about with this team. And Vescovi's stat line, I think, is even better than people realized. 13.3 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.2 assists, and almost 2 steals a game. A little bit overshadowed last year, I get that, but I actually think I think Vescovi could be nearly as good this year as you thought Fulkerson might have been due a couple years back when we rated him really high in the top 101.
Yeah, let's say Tennessee lives up to expectations and is a legitimate top 10 team. Who from that team would be the most likely first team or second team or third team All-American? I think that's Santiago Vescovi. Even more than Julian Phillips, even more than Zakai Ziegler. But when you bring back 4 of your top 5 scorers from a team that, again, I think should have been a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, like that's a good place to start. Like it doesn't get as much attention because they're not bringing back a Armando Bacot or a Drew Timme or a Hunter Dickinson or a guy at that level, but they're bringing back some really, really solid guys. And then they're enrolling a 5-star, consensus top 15 player freshman in the country to that roster. So I like the roster a lot. You brought up Tyreek Key. He's interesting because, he didn't play last season at all. He had shoulder surgery in November. So he's played 4 years of college at Indiana State, but didn't play last year. He was going to use his super senior season at Indiana State last season, and then he got hurt, so he never played. So he maintains that year of eligibility, and this is exactly the type of example I love when I'm advocating for, transfers to be available immediately. Tyreek Key has played the past 4 years at Indiana State, or he played 4 years at Indiana State. Then he was in school there last year, but did not play. You know where he's from? Clay County High in Tennessee. Like 125 miles from Knoxville is where he grew up. I'm assuming he was not offered a scholarship to the University of Tennessee coming out of high school. But I'm also assuming he always dreamed, because he grew up in Tennessee, of at the very least playing in the SEC, perhaps playing in his home state university, University of Tennessee. But coming out of high school, he probably wasn't, at least high major coaches didn't believe he was good enough to do that. That's how he ended up at Indiana State. But then he goes to Indiana State, and he, 2 seasons ago averaged 17 points per game, shot 37.4% from 3 over a 4-year career there. And suddenly his home state school is like, hey, we could use a guy like you. Do you want to use your last year of eligibility playing in the SEC in your home state for the big state university? Like, that's an awesome story. That's an awesome thing. And that's why I have for a long time been in favor of players being allowed to transfer and be available immediately, and transfers moving up as a good thing, not a bad thing. That has forever been framed by some as a bad thing. At the mid-major level, you develop these guys, and then if they're good, you lose them to the high major schools. Well, what's so bad about that? All these kids, nobody dreams of being a mid-major player. That's not anybody's dream. Every basketball player dreams of playing at the biggest schools, on national television, all of that stuff. And then you go wherever you go because often it's the best opportunity you can get. But if you prove yourself and suddenly you're a desired prospect at the high major level, that should be celebrated as a good thing, not labeled a bad thing. And this Tyreek Keek story is a pretty good example of that. I don't know what type of impact he's going to have at Tennessee. I imagine he comes off the bench and certainly doesn't score 17 points per game, but comes off the bench and can be a meaningful player. But he's going to get to play his last year of college basketball at the University of Tennessee after growing up 125 miles from the University of Tennessee. That's a neat story.
It is a neat story. We'll see what impact he has. I remember a couple years ago, a really, really good mid/low major player here in Connecticut, EJ Anisicki, who played at Sacred Heart and was like maybe a top 2 player in the NEC. His sister actually played for Pat Summitt at Tennessee. He transferred there and was a non-factor, which isn't to say that's going to be repeated, but I'm just saying there's been a recent example of a really quality mid-major player going to play for Barnes, and then just it didn't quite work out. A couple more notes on the roster. They'll bring back Olivier Kamwa, 8.6 points, 5.6 rebounds, in about 21 and a half minutes. He'd be the guy that I'd keep an eye on in terms of he's not going to be 1, 2, or 3 in terms of production or importance or value, but I do think all of the pieces here with Tennessee, they all seem to make sense. And then Josiah Jordan-James, who I do think, I think he's got a chance. It's not unthinkable. I'm not predicting that it'll happen, Parrish, but he was a 5-star recruit, top 25 player coming out of high school. Now he did not envision his college career lasting as long as it has, but it has. He's averaged 10 points and 6 boards a season ago. We sometimes see it, a guy who was a talented prospect coming out of high school, top 50, top 75, Jordan James, top 25 guy by their junior, in his case, the senior year, like something really clicks and it all comes together. Maybe it does for him. He's been fine. He's been a solid player, but he's been a good college player, but based on high school reputation, obviously, if you're a 5-star guy and you're still in school this deep into your college career, like things haven't gone the way you thought they would go. That's right. That's just a fact. Which, by the way, isn't to say that things went wrong. I refuse to say that because there are so many factors, and everyone, it's become a cliche. But run your own race, and there is something to that. Maybe he becomes a great college player this year. I think there is potential for that. Again, with Vescovy, and I'm all in on Ziegler. Phillips there's been some freshmen who have been able to stand out under Barnes, and you throw in Kamwa. I think there's a lot there. But with Tennessee, a lot of it is, all right, can you be top 3, top 4 in the SEC? We expect that to happen. And then when you get to the tournament, can you actually make a deep run there? Now, Tennessee fans, I think, are appropriately engaged with this team and Barnes. And while they have had disappointment, it's not irrational. But I think one more flame out in the tournament, and then things really start to to get irritable around there. So with that said, before we predict how Tennessee will be seeded, let's do our regular season win total here. I'll give you the games to know GP. I did say on the previous episode I would give you the prediction first. So I will give my regular season win total after I run down the notable games on the schedule. Here's the non-con. We get Colorado and Nashville, which is kind of like a surprise. I don't know the story behind that, but they're going to play on November 13th, so relatively soon at the start of the season.
I bet Kim English got that done.
That's a great point. That's actually probably legitimately happened. Kim English, now the head coach at George Mason, former assistant both at Colorado and at Tennessee. So it's the Kim English Classic. That's what we'll call that one. November 13th, the first notable game for the Vols. Then they're going to be in the battle for Atlantis. They play Butler to start. Hey, Barnes, Mata, intriguing head coach matchup. We'll see what Butler is. There's a little bit of intrigue there. Then they're going to get either BYU or USC. Both could potentially be tournament teams. We'll see this year. And then on the other side of the bracket, they'll play one of these 4: Kansas, Dayton, NC State, or Wisconsin. So there's some challenge there. I wouldn't necessarily label Tennessee as the favorite in the battle for Atlantis, but I think at worst it's the second best team behind Kansas there. Then they'll play Maryland in Brooklyn for the Hall of Fame Invitational on December 11th. And there's 2 more games of note. At Arizona, December 17th. Love to see that one. That's obviously a home and home there. And then they are at home in the SEC Big 12 to Texas, which is our next team in our summer shoot around series. So really, when you factor in the 3 Battle for Atlantis games, Colorado, Maryland, there are 7 games of note for the Vols, which is good. And then how about this, GP? The SEC schedule. Okay, so they'll get Kentucky twice, they'll get Auburn twice, but they only get Arkansas once, and that's at home. They can only get Alabama once. That's at home. They get the benefit of Vandy twice. They get South Carolina with a new coach twice. They get Missouri only once with a new coach. That's at home. They get Georgia with a new coach only once. That's at home. The SEC schedule, as it looks right now heading into the season, significantly benefits Tennessee as far as I'm concerned. So that being said, I will say give me 24 wins for the Vols. That would be 24-7 with a 31-game schedule, 7 games of note, but I wouldn't say they're all of equal difficulty in the non-conference. Colorado, Maryland, and Brooklyn. They're going to be intriguing. They're going to get tripped up, but you have them third in the SEC. With the schedule they have, they could finish third. They could finish fourth. They could finish fifth. But if they finish first or second, I wouldn't be surprised. Mark me down for Tennessee at 24 dubs heading into the SEC tournament.
That's exactly what I had too.
Okay, that's fair.
I
got you might go one higher though.
2-1 in it's Battle for Atlantis, right?
Yes.
2-1 in the Battle for Atlantis. However that shakes out. Loss at Arizona. Another loss, non-league loss somewhere else. So 3. And then I've got them third in the SEC. Third in the SEC last season was a 14-4 record. And that gets you to 7 losses. That gets you to 24-7 heading into the SEC tournament. So maybe I'll go 25-6 just to be different. Okay. But we're obviously in the same range there. And if they do finish, they're going to be in a position to get a 2 seed, a possible 3 seed, 4 seed again. What we just described is, I think, certainly a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. Okay. So then it comes down to what you touched on earlier, which is Rick has been really good at Tennessee. Like, it got off to a slow start, but the past 4 seasons, he's coached 7 seasons at Tennessee. He's made each of the past 4 NCAA tournaments. Obviously, we didn't have one in 2020, dumbest pandemic of my lifetime. He's advanced in 3 of the 4 NCAA tournaments he's made at Tennessee, but only made the Sweet 16 once, and that was in 2019. Here's where it gets problematic. They've been eliminated by a higher seeded team or a lower seeded team. I guess that's the way to say it. In all 4 NCAA tournaments.
A worse seeded team. Yes.
A worse seeded team in all 4 NCAA tournaments. Lost as a 3 seed to 11 seed Loyola Chicago in 2018. Lost as a 2 seed to 3 seed Purdue in 2019. Lost as a 5 seed to 12 seed Oregon State in 2021. Lost as a 3 seed to 11 seed Michigan last season. That's the knock. Like, okay, why? Because here's the thing: when you are starting a rebuild with a new coach, and that's more or less what Rick had to do at Tennessee. It's like, man, if we just start making the NCAA tournament, that'll be great. Then you start making the NCAA tournament every year, and it's like, okay, but we're losing earlier than we should. That's not fun. And that has been the case at Tennessee. 4 losses to worse seeded teams in the NCAA tournament. That is what happened. And it's sort of been a thing connected to Rick throughout his career. He's
25 and 25 all time in the NCAA tournament.
He's made 26 NCAA tournaments in 35 seasons as a Division I head coach. So he's been in the NCAA tournament in 74% of his seasons. That's pretty great. I mean, that's clearly great.
That's high level. Yes.
But he's only made the Sweet 16 7 times, only made the Elite 8 3 times, only got that 1 Final Four. So when people start banging that drum, that is what it's rooted in. Okay, he can clearly assemble good teams, very good teams, reliably, consistently. But what happens when you get into the NCAA tournament? And absolutely, like, you gotta, if that's becoming a bullet point connected to your tenure, then you got to do something to shake that one. And so that when we're talking about Tennessee next off season and looking back at the 2022-23 season, that conversation will be shaped not by where the Vols finish in the SEC, not by whether they win back-to-back SEC tournaments or not. It's going to be shaped by how deep did they go in the NCAA tournament and who did they lose to when they lost, assuming they don't win the whole thing. And if it's a fifth straight tournament with an exit created by a worse seeded team, well, that's going to be that's when everybody will get their Twitter jokes off.
That's really, where we're at with Tennessee. Can you make a deep run? And because that's what they're looking for. And Tennessee fans would trade off on, a 7 seed, but get us into the second weekend and we'll knock off.
Well, here's the thing. If in one of these years he'd have been an 8 seed and then lost to a 1 seed in the second round, it's like, whatever. But when you're a 3 seed losing to an 11, a 5 seed losing to a 12, a 2 seed losing to a 3, that's not bad, obviously. But a 3 seed losing to an 11, I mean, in 3 of the 4 years, top 5 seed losing to a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. That starts to, that starts to become the way people perceive what's happening there. Whether it's fair or not, it's a very easy thing to identify and then pound on.
I'd be surprised if they're not a significant factor in the SEC. Again, you've got them top 10. I don't think there's any argument about keeping this team outside the top 15. At worst, heading into the season, they look pretty good. And again, I'm a believer in Vescovy. You got to be, admittedly, you have to either have been like a Tennessee fan or a college hoops hardcore to really know his game, but he's good. And Ziegler, like, you could see it. Now, he's small, but I think that he's going to make a big jump, and I think James will as well. And we should be talking about the Vols all season long.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. And thank you guys once again for listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Over at Apple, leave 5 stars and a nice review. Type some words. There's more of us than there are of them. That needs to be reflected in the comments over at Apple. And we appreciate you doing that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please knock that out. And we'll talk to you again real soon. Till then,